The table was set for two, candles flickering against the polished wine glasses, soft jazz humming through the quiet house. Lena Hartley smoothed her dress, checked the clock again. 7:18 p.m. Daniel was always late, but never this late. She poured herself a glass of wine, forcing a smile at her reflection in the dark kitchen window. 5 years. 5 years of marriage built on laughter, trust, and the kind of small compromises that made love believable. She'd spent the afternoon cooking his favorite meal, rosemary chicken, mashed potatoes, the same dinner they'd shared the night he proposed. By 8:10, the meal was cold. She reheated it, plated it again, pretending the night wasn't unraveling. When she finally called his phone, it went straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's me," she said softly. "Dinner's ready. I hope you're not working late again." Her voice trembled. She ended the call quickly, embarrassed by how fragile she sounded. Outside, rain began to fall, the kind that blurred streetlights and made the world seem distant. She stood by the window, watching the driveway, waiting for headlights that never appeared. By 9, her anger bloomed through the worry. She called again. Voicemail, again. Voicemail. Each unanswered ring fed something dark and unfamiliar inside her. She sat down, staring at the untouched plate across from her. The candlelight had melted into small pools of wax. The house felt too big. Every clock ticked too loud. She picked up his chair napkin and pressed it to her face, catching the faint trace of his cologne. It was the smell of certainty, of a man who always came home. Until tonight, when the power flickered, she almost laughed. It felt like the universe mocking her, reminding her how fragile everything was. At 10:17, she whispered into the silence, "Where are you, Daniel?" Only the steady hum of the refrigerator answered. Then her phone lit up with a message notification. Unknown number. She hesitated before opening it. The words were simple, cold. "You should stop waiting for him." The message haunted her all night. Lena stared at it until the screen dimmed, as if the phone itself wanted to look away. By morning, she hadn't slept. The dinner table was still set. The candles hardened into strange shapes, mocking the idea of celebration. At 7:42 a.m., she finally called the police. Her voice shook as she told them her husband never came home, that something must have happened. When the doorbell rang an hour later, 2 officers stood outside in rain-dark uniforms. Behind them, the sky hung low and gray, heavy with more than weather. Detective Grant Marlowe introduced himself with the calm, deliberate tone of someone used to tragedy. His gaze flicked around the kitchen, plates untouched, wine glass still half full. "When was the last time you saw your husband, Mrs. Hartley?" "Yesterday morning. He left for work around 8. Said he'd be home early." Marlowe nodded, jotting something in his notebook. "And this message you received, did you recognize the number?" "No, it was blocked. By afternoon, they'd found his car, parked near the riverbank, doors unlocked, keys still in the ignition. Inside, his wallet, his wedding ring, and a half-empty coffee cup. The passenger seat was wiped clean, no fingerprints." Marlowe crouched by the open door, studying the details like a puzzle. "If he left voluntarily," he murmured, "why leave the keys behind?" The younger officer whispered, "Could be suicide." Lena's voice cut through the drizzle. "Daniel wouldn't do that. He's not the type." Marlowe turned to her. "Everyone's the type, Mrs. Hartley, depending on what they're running from." She flinched, stepping back. The detective's eyes lingered, not unkind but curious, as though she were another piece of evidence. That evening, as the river swallowed the last of the daylight, Marlowe stood watching the water twist and darken. Something about the scene felt wrong. He didn't believe Daniel Hartley had vanished. He believed someone had made him disappear, and tomorrow he would start with the wife. Detective Marlowe returned to the Hartley home the next morning. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of damp earth and burnt coffee. Lena greeted him at the door, pale and sleepless, her hair pulled back in a trembling knot. The dining table from 2 nights ago remained untouched, as if she'd frozen time in defiance. He set his notepad on the counter. "Let's go over it again, Mrs. Hartley. Every detail of last night before your husband disappeared." She took a deep breath, voice measured. "We had dinner plans. He didn't show. I called him, no answer. I waited until midnight, then went to bed. Did you two argue recently?" Her eyes flicked toward the cold plates. Every couple argues. Nothing unusual? Marlowe studied her carefully. A neighbor reported hearing shouting. Said it came from your house around midnight. A crash too. Can you explain that? Lena blinked, confusion or performance crossing her face. That's impossible. I was alone. Maybe it was the TV? There was no TV on when officers arrived. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her robe. Are you accusing me of something? I'm just looking for truth, he replied evenly. She looked away, steadying herself. Truth? The truth is my husband's missing, and instead of finding him, you're digging into my walls and listening to my neighbors. Marlowe wrote something down, not looking up. Do you want to tell me about the wine bottle? Her head snapped up. What wine bottle? The one found shattered outside by the back porch. Red wine. Same brand as the one in your kitchen. Glass mixed with something darker. Possibly blood. Forensics will confirm. Lena's composure faltered. Her mouth parted as if to speak, but no words came. Then just as quickly she smiled. If it's blood, it's mine. I cut myself opening a drawer. The detective held her gaze for a long moment. The silence stretched, taut and uneasy. Finally he stood. We'll verify that. When he left, Lena closed the door and leaned against it, breath unsteady. Her reflection in the hallway mirror looked unfamiliar, like someone rehearsing fear instead of feeling it. Outside, Marlowe paused by his car, watching her silhouette through the curtains. He wasn't sure what she was hiding, only that she'd practiced it well. Detective Marlowe spent the night reviewing Daniel Hartley's financials. The numbers told a story far cleaner than the woman who'd told it. No gambling, no debt, just routine expenses. Then a curious pattern appeared. Identical transfers every month to an unlisted account, followed by rent payments to an address downtown. By morning, Marlowe and his partner, Officer Raines, stood in front of an aging brick complex at 212 Briar Street. The hallway smelled of dust and cologne. Apartment 3B. The lock gave way after a quiet nudge. The air inside felt lived in. Too lived in for a man who supposedly shared a home elsewhere. Men's clothes filled the closet. All expensive brands Lena couldn't have missed. A sleek watch glinted on the dresser beside a tray of cufflinks, and a silver ring that wasn't a wedding band. On the bedside table sat an unopened bottle of champagne and 2 glasses, still in their packaging. Raines whistled softly. Guess Mr. Hartley didn't spend his nights alone? Marlowe said nothing. He moved through the apartment methodically, eyes taking in the contradictions. A framed photograph on the mantel stopped him cold. Daniel, smiling, arm around a woman who wasn't Lena. The image was recent. Behind them, city lights blurred into gold. On the dresser, a faint trail of perfume lingered. Floral, expensive, intimate. He found receipts tucked in a drawer. Jewelry purchases, hotel bookings, designer dresses. Each signed A. Vale, a lover, Raines muttered. That explains the lies. Maybe, Marlowe said. But it doesn't explain the car at the river. In the bathroom, he noticed something strange. A toothbrush still wet, a towel freshly used. Someone had been here recently. He checked the trash bin. A receipt from 3 nights ago. Dinner for 2. When they stepped outside, the rain had started again, soft and relentless. Marlowe looked up at the glowing windows of the complex. He built himself another life, he said quietly. And someone in that life knows where he went. Raines frowned. You think the wife knew? Marlowe slipped the photo into an evidence bag. If she didn't before, she will now. He looked down the street where city lights faded into darkness, toward the woman in the picture. Her name was Elise Vale, and she would be their next call. Elise Vale answered the door with mascara still streaked beneath her eyes, as if she'd already been crying long before they arrived. Detective Marlowe introduced himself gently, showing his badge while Officer Raines observed in silence. Is this about Aaron? She asked, her voice thin, hopeful. Marlowe paused. We're here about Daniel Hartley. Confusion flickered across her face. I don't know that name. He handed her a photo. Take a look. The moment her gaze met Daniel's smiling face in the wedding picture, her expression drained to white. That's him, she whispered. But his name's Aaron Cole. He told me he was divorced. Said his wife was dangerous. Marlowe exchanged a glance with Raines. How long were you seeing him? Almost a year, she said, voice breaking. He had this place. Said he was rebuilding his life. He wanted us to move to Vancouver by Christmas. Did he mention Lena Hartley? Elise's brow tightened. Only once. He said she wasn't well, that she stalked him. I thought she was some bitter ex. Marlowe studied her, a woman entangled in someone else's lie. When did you last see him? 3 nights ago. He came over late. He was nervous, kept checking his phone. Said he needed to disappear for a while. I thought he was joking. Her eyes filled again. He kissed me goodbye, said I'd see him soon. Rains opened his notebook. Did he leave anything behind? Elise hesitated, then pointed to a small wooden box on the shelf. Inside were folded letters, all signed D.H. Marlowe held one up. He never used his real name, but he signed with his initials. Why? I asked once, Elise whispered. He said it was habit. Marlowe slipped the letter into an evidence bag. Miss Vale, he said softly, if he lied to you about his name, he might have lied about everything else. She looked at him, trembling. Detective, who was I living with? Marlowe didn't answer. He couldn't. Because for the first time, he realized he didn't know either. The name Aaron Cole lingered in Marlowe's mind long after they left Elise's apartment. 2 names, 2 lives, 1 man. The puzzle had grown teeth. At the station, he spread the evidence across the table. Passports, credit cards, bank records. Each bore a different alias. Daniel Hartley, Aaron Cole, David Hale. Same face, same signature. The man had lived 3 lives, each more elaborate than the last. Rains leaned over the table. You think he's a con artist? Not just a con, Marlowe muttered. A craftsman. The file on Daniel Hartley grew thick overnight. Unsolved fraud cases from 3 states suddenly made sense. A pattern of vanished investments, empty accounts, and people left chasing shadows. Yet somehow he'd settled down, built a marriage, a home, a normal life with Lena Hartley. Until it fractured. For Lena, the world had narrowed to a single question. Who was the man I loved? She sat in the dim kitchen, surrounded by photographs, smiling memories that now felt like evidence. In every image, Daniel's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, protective yet distant. She remembered the nights he'd step outside to take a call, always whispering, always locking his phone when he came back. Once she'd asked who he was talking to. He'd smiled and said, "No one who matters." Now, the echo of that lie scraped at her. She opened his study drawer for the 100th time, searching for something she might have missed. Beneath old bills and receipts, she found a passport, Canadian, under the name David Hale. The photo was his. The birth date wasn't. Her breath caught. The edges of her reality began to peel away. When Detective Marlowe called later that evening, his tone was different, measured, careful. Mrs. Hartley, we've uncovered something. Your husband had multiple identities. He's connected to several financial crimes. Lena said nothing. The silence between them stretched, heavy with things unsaid. Finally, she whispered, "Then whoever he was, he's not coming back, is he?" Marlowe hesitated. "That depends on who finds him first." She hung up, her hand trembling. The man she'd loved was a stranger, and somewhere out there, that stranger had vanished into the dark, and someone else might already know where he went. The next morning, Detective Marlowe returned to the Hartley house with a search warrant. Lena stood by the doorway, pale and hollow-eyed. Her arms crossed like she was holding herself together. "I already told you everything," she said quietly. "Then you won't mind if we take another look?" Marlowe replied. His team spread through the house, methodical and silent. The study, Daniel's sanctuary, smelled faintly of cedar and dust. Marlowe opened drawers, sifted through old receipts, notes, and documents. Then something caught his eye. A sealed envelope tucked beneath a false bottom of the desk drawer. The paper was smeared dark red along the edge. Blood. He held it carefully with gloved hands. The handwriting on the front was neat, deliberate. "L.H. Mrs. Hartley," he called. "Does this mean anything to you?" Her gaze fixed on the envelope, pupils narrowing. "That's his handwriting," she whispered. Marlowe slid it open. Inside was a single page, creased and stained. The message was short, jagged as though written in haste. "If they find me, don't trust anyone. Especially her, no signature, no date. Just that warning, pointed and poisonous." Lena took a step back, shaking her head. "He must have meant someone else." "Who?" Marlowe asked. "I don't know. Maybe that woman, Elise? But the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Marlowe studied her reaction, noting the way her breathing shifted, how her eyes flicked toward the hallway as if she wanted to run. He slid the letter into an evidence bag. "We'll have it tested," he said simply. Lena pressed her hands against the counter, her composure cracking. "You think I hurt him, don't you?" "I think someone did," Marlowe replied. "And this letter might tell us who." Tears spilled down her cheeks. Whether real or rehearsed, he couldn't tell. When the officers left, Lena sank to the floor, the house heavy with silence. She pressed her palm to her chest, feeling her pulse hammer against her ribs. That letter had been hidden for a reason, and she knew exactly what Daniel meant by her. Outside, through the window, Marlowe watched her, still trembling, unreadable. He wasn't sure whether he'd just found the first clue to Daniel's fate or the first lie in Lena's confession. Detective Marlowe watched Lena from across the interrogation table. The fluorescent light above hummed faintly, washing her pale face in sterile white. Between them sat a recorder, its small red light blinking. Steady, patient, waiting. Lena's hands were clasped together, knuckles white. She hadn't spoken since they'd brought her in. Marlowe leaned forward. "The letter. Let's start there. You said you didn't know what he meant by her. You sure about that?" She looked up, eyes glistening. "I told you Daniel was paranoid. He was lying to everyone. Why would I believe one last lie from a man who couldn't tell the truth?" Marlowe's tone softened. "Maybe because it wasn't a lie. Maybe because you knew he was living two lives." Something flickered behind her eyes, too quick to catch but enough to make him press further. "You found out about Elise Vale, didn't you?" Lena's lip trembled. "He told me she was just business." "I wanted to believe him, but you didn't." She exhaled shakily, her voice breaking. "You don't understand what it's like to love someone who's always somewhere else." Every time I asked where he'd been, he'd smile and tell me not to worry. And I didn't, because loving him meant pretending not to see. Her tears fell, slow and deliberate. Marlowe let the silence stretch, watching how she measured each breath. Then suddenly, the softness vanished. Her tone hardened. "You think I killed him, don't you? I think you know more than you're saying." A small, cold smile curved her lips. "Maybe I do. But knowing something and doing something, those aren't the same, Detective." "You're protecting someone," Marlowe said quietly. "Who?" Her eyes narrowed. "Maybe I'm protecting myself. Maybe that's all any of us ever do." Marlowe studied her, his pen hovering over the pad. She was shifting, between victim and manipulator, truth and theater. He turned off the recorder. "We're done for today." As he stood, Lena whispered almost tenderly, "You'll find him. But not the way you expect." Marlowe hesitated at the door. Something in her tone chilled him. Not grief, not fear, but certainty. And later that night, when divers called from the riverbank, he understood why. By dawn, the call came in. Marlowe was already awake, coffee half finished, the interrogation replaying in his head. Lena's last words, "You'll find him, but not the way you expect," kept looping like an unfinished warning. Now, the voice over the radio said, "We've got something, sir. Down by the river." When he arrived, the scene was cordoned off. Mist hung low over the water, and divers stood shivering near the bank. One of them pointed to a mud-streaked suitcase resting on a blue tarp. Marlowe crouched beside it. The stench of river rot mixed with something metallic, blood. Inside were neatly folded clothes, dark stains seeping through the fabric. A gun. And at the bottom, a single silver wedding ring engraved in cursive, "To L forever." He stared at it for a long moment, then muttered, "Lena Hartley." Forensics moved fast. The blood on the clothes matched Daniel Hartley's DNA. The gun held partial prints, enough to run a match. When the results came in, Raines burst into the office, breathless. "It's not Lena." Marlowe looked up. "Then who?" "Elise Vale." The name hung in the air like a crack of thunder. Marlowe leaned back, eyes narrowing. "You're sure?" 100%. "Prints on the grip, the trigger, even the clip. It's her weapon." He stared at the case file spread across his desk. Two women bound by one man's lies, both with motive, both drowning in his shadow. Yet something still didn't fit. Elise had seemed broken, not dangerous. Marlowe closed the file slowly. Bring her in. Outside his window, the rain returned, soft, relentless, erasing footprints by the river. As he watched it fall, one thought refused to leave him. If Elise's prints were on the gun, who packed the suitcase? Because whoever did it wanted the world to believe one simple story, while the real one was still hidden beneath the current. And somewhere, Lena Hartley was watching it unfold. Detective Marlowe watched through the glass as Lena Hartley entered the interrogation room, where Elise Vale sat, wrists cuffed, eyes red from crying. He hadn't planned to let them meet, but Lena had insisted, calm and unwavering, as if she'd already rehearsed the encounter in her mind. The two women faced each other across the metal table. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the buzz of the overhead light filled the silence. Elise broke first. "I didn't kill him," she said, voice trembling. "You have to believe that." Lena tilted her head, studying her with eerie gentleness. "Belief has nothing to do with it, Elise. You loved him." Tears spilled down Elise's cheeks. "He told me you'd understand. He said you'd forgive me once you knew the truth." A faint smile curved Lena's lips. "Forgive you?" she murmured. "Oh, Elise, I already did." Elise blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Lena leaned closer, voice low, almost tender. "The night he didn't come home, I stopped waiting. I went to that apartment. I saw the photos. The dresses, the lies. He came in and tried to explain, but I'd already decided what forgiveness looked like." Elise's breath caught. "You're lying," Lena's gaze never wavered. "No, I'm confessing." Marlowe's pulse quickened behind the glass, every word cutting through the static of the recorder. Lena continued softly. "He begged. Said he loved us both. I told him love isn't something you divide. It's something you bury. Then I pulled the trigger." Elise stared, horror dawning. "But the gun, my prints, I wiped it, then gave it to you," Lena said simply. "He trusted you enough to hide his sins with you. I trusted you to carry the blame." Silence fell. Elise's sobs broke it, jagged and raw. Lena rose, smoothing her coat. "You said he told you I'd understand," she whispered. "He was right." Marlowe met her eyes as she stepped out. She smiled faintly, almost kindly. "Case closed, detective," she said. "You just don't know it yet." Outside, thunder rolled, a storm breaking at last. 2 days after Lena's visit to Elise, Detective Marlowe sat alone in the evidence room, the hum of the monitor filling the silence. Forensics had just returned the final report. One item flagged for urgent review. A recovered memory card from the apartment's smoke detector. Hidden camera. He inserted it into the laptop, the screen flickering to life with grainy footage. The timestamp read March 14th, 10:42 p.m. The video opened on Daniel, alive. He sat on the couch, pouring whiskey into 2 glasses. His expression was anxious, restless. Moments later, the door opened. Lena stepped in, calm, composed, gloves on. Marlowe leaned forward. She smiled at her husband as though nothing were wrong. They spoke briefly, though the audio was faint. Then she reached into her purse, uncapped a small vial, and poured a clear liquid into his drink. Her movements were smooth, practiced. Daniel didn't notice. He lifted the glass, took a sip. Within seconds, he began coughing, confused, panicked. Lena's face didn't change. She sat beside him, whispering something no one could hear. Then she leaned closer and kissed his forehead as his body went still. For a long moment, she stared at him. Then she turned her head, directly toward the hidden camera, and smiled, a slow, knowing smile. Marlowe froze. The footage ended there. He sat motionless, the room unbearably quiet. All the interviews, the tears, the trembling hands. It had all been theater. She hadn't broken under guilt or pressure because there was nothing accidental about it. Every move, every lie, every tear had been part of her performance. He closed the laptop and exhaled. "God help us," he whispered. Outside the precinct, thunder rolled again, echoing down the empty street. Lena Hartley was free, calm, grieving, and utterly untouchable. And as the storm pressed against the windows, Marlowe realized the truth too late. The perfect wife had written her own ending, and she'd made sure everyone else played their part.